soul siblings, this is Natalie and you're watching Goddess Undone, and today's video is a tarot reading, and the question is, how can I strengthen my relationship with the one that I love? So I wanted to do this. I was called to do a kind of a love reading to just kind of bring that like flavor, you know, back in, that flavor of love and passion. Things are feeling really, you know, scary right now, really, you know, dry right now, uncertain, cold. Talking about love, kind of a good distraction, and also it might help you address certain things, because I think with the whole quarantine situation, we're kind of on top of each other, right? Like we're spending a whole bunch of time together. We're dealing with a lot of our own personal issues, and the energy is kind of reflecting back and forth between people. So I think that there is definitely a feeling of strain on a lot of relationships. So I think that, you know, this is a good time to kind of address how to strengthen the relationships. I do have some videos for a crisis toolkit to how to deal with some of the more eminent, serious problems that have come out of the whole coronavirus quarantine situation. I felt like this would be a good extension. It's a little bit of a different direction, but I also think it does address the current times that we're in, and maybe kind of will give you like a nice incentive or fuzzy feeling about your significant other, or just a way to kind of be happier in that relationship and be able to take solace and have fun and, like, you know, do something a little bit more meaningful, enjoyable, distracting, but also really definitely focusing on the most important relationship you have in your life. I just wanted to take a moment of silence to pay reverence to George Floyd and everything that's going on in our country right now with the riots, and just, you know, a lot of people are feeling really scared, really unseen, really unheard. And this is something that's kind of been going on for what seems like all of time to me. A lot of people pitting themselves against each other, just a lot of challenge. I just want to take a moment, you know, to kind of pay reverence to his life and so many other lives we've lost in vain, and just to acknowledge, because this, you know, this video isn't really about that. I have a video about this whole topic. I don't want to ignore it considering the situation that we're in right now, so I just want to take a moment of silence right here just to pay that reverence. Okay, if you are interested in seeing my tarot reading on how you can strengthen the relationship with the one that you love, if you are interested in seeing that, then keep on watching. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started in just a moment. I am going to show you my shuffling and show you the spread, and once we're done with that, I will pull the camera face up to do the reading for you guys. So we're just shuffling the tarot cards over here. So we have the Fool, the Hanged Man, the Nine of Swords, the Ace of Swords, the Eight of Pentacles, and the Eight of Wands. So now I'm going to pull a couple of oracle cards as well. I'm going to start with the Prism Oracle. Anger. And I'm called to just use this one oracle deck, so I'm going to pull another card from the Prism Oracle. And it just popped right out at me. Rejection. Okay, so this is our relationship spread. For tarot cards, we have the Fool, the Hanged Man, the Nine of Swords, the Ace of Swords, the Eight of Pentacles, and the Eight of Wands. And this is the Queen Alice Tarot deck by Dame Darcy. We also have from the Prism Oracle the card Anger and the card Rejection. So let's get started with this reading. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started with this reading. Again, the question is, how can I strengthen my relationship with the one that I love? So I've noticed a couple of things here. We pulled 2 8 cards. We have the Eight of Pentacles and the Eight of Wands. And we also have pulled a couple of Swords cards here. We have the Nine of Swords and the Ace of Swords and a couple of major arcana. So let's get started with these 8 cards. So I feel like there is definitely, with the Eight of Pentacles, relationships take work. So it's not going to always be easy. You kind of know this on a rational level, but sometimes it gets frustrating emotionally. You kind of want your partner to meet you all the way, so to speak, but you do have to meet your partner halfway. There has to be that compromise. And when I say compromise, I don't mean in the sense of sacrificing something that you really want. You'll kind of know the difference. Like, intuition is always the baseline for my readings. It's kind of funny, like I can say all these things, but then I always have to say whether I pull intuition cards or not. You have to use your intuition, but it's so important. I can only like show you the door, give you some options, and you can walk through it. So compromise means meeting someone halfway, but it doesn't mean sacrificing your own values or your own soul callings or things like that. So you have to kind of ask yourself, does meeting this person halfway mean dimming my own light, or, you know, turning my own light off? Or is it hurting me to meet this person halfway because what they need is so incompatible and so different from what I need or what I want? So I think that that's kind of a question you have to ask yourself. And, you know, if you can answer, you know, yes, I'm willing to kind of be a little less selfish. You know, I know that this is a hard time. I know that we're all kind of hurting and we might feel a little more vulnerable, a little more needy, so to speak, but kind of like realizing like, okay, like, you know, maybe I'm being a little bit selfish here, or maybe I can kind of compromise a little bit on this, kind of, you know, shrug it off. And, you know, it's not exactly the way I would do things or the way I would want things, but it's, you know, it's not hurting me fundamentally. It's not fundamentally against myself. And I kind of understand maybe the reason why I want things a different way is because I'm dealing with my own vulnerabilities, my own fears, my own immaturity, things like that. So you definitely have to work at the relationship and kind of meet the person halfway. And I was saying start with the 8s, but I think now that I'm kind of going through this, I think the Eight of Wands will come to me a little bit later. So I see a couple of cards here, like such as the Fool and the Ace of Swords. This is telling me that maybe it's time to approach the relationship from a fresh angle, from a new angle. So with the Fool, it's kind of like saying, you know, if you have a relationship you've been in a relationship for a while, it kind of feels like it's going stale, you kind of need to give it new energy, right? Maybe going back to doing something that you used to do when you were younger and you just kind of feel like, oh, you know, that's silly, you know, like, I mean, I don't know, like I'm just getting this image in my head. This isn't really something that I would do, but, you know, like let's say, you know, when you, like 10 years ago when you first were falling in love, that you used to go skinny dipping in the lake or something like that, and now you're a little bit older, you feel a little bit, you know, weird about your body at this point, you know, things have changed, maybe you have kids, maybe you're just kind of, you know, becoming more mature, more thoughtful, you think that that's kind of a weird thing. Maybe if that's something that you really loved, you should do it again. You should try it again and just kind of have fun with it and go back to that reinvigoration. So that's kind of one way, is kind of like going back to the start, but also you can try new things. So if there's certain, things that, like if you haven't taken a trip to a certain place, like, it would be a good time to maybe do that. I know that the quarantine situation is going on, but we're slowly getting out of it. So I would say probably in the next couple of months, it'll probably be relatively safe to travel. So if there's somewhere you guys have always kind of talked about wanting to go, but you haven't done that, like I would say travel is good. Either, travel to, I've kind of seen that whole like thing, like beginning with the full beginning or fresh start. So it's either maybe somewhere you went to at the beginning of your relationship that you were really drawn to that you just haven't been to a while for whatever reason, or something that's like, or just somewhere you haven't been before. Kind of that would kind of strengthen the relationship and bring some of that fresh, healthy energy flowing through it. So I also have the Ace of Swords here. And this is just telling me not to take things so seriously. I feel like, when we're in a relationship, we kind of get in this rut. Like we're kind of stuck in our own insecurities, our own doubts about ourselves, our own frustrations with our own lives. And that person in the relationship that you're with, it kind of reflects off of that. So I feel like with the Ace of Swords, it's just kind of telling us to watch that thinking where you're starting to kind of, project what's your own insecurities, your own shortcomings, your own disappointments, where you start to project that onto your significant other. Maybe you're projecting as opposed to actually being frustrated with that person. Again, you have to examine and deep down if one of the disappointments is because of the significant other specifically, that would be like a different road to go down, a different approach. So it's just saying to approaching that thought process a little bit differently, where you might be projecting something of your own crap, so to speak, onto your significant other, and where can you redirect that thinking, and where maybe have you been overthinking in situations regarding your significant other or regarding yourself that are kind of bringing your relationship down. You have to kind of forget about that, so to speak, and just kind of take a different approach, or just refresh your thinking, or be aware of your thinking. It's just that shift. So for me, the Ace of Swords is like a shift in your thinking. The thinking is kind of a side effect here of some feeling of frustration, feeling of boredom. You kind of start to get these thoughts, but just kind of realizing where where you end and your significant other begins. Just kind of being aware of that and not feeling so heavy or taking everything with such heavy thought. You're overthinking it a little bit. And with that projecting and overthinking, and it's just casting like this negative energy, and it's like killing the vibe between the two of you because they can feel it and stuff like that. So I think it's just minding your thoughts and maybe shifting them where you haven't, realized they need to be shifted, or, because, thoughts create energy. So these certain negative thoughts that you might be having about your significant other that may be unfounded could be something that can be shifted, that can be made lighter. I see like that kind of like light bulb, like that spark, like it's just going into like a lighter, brighter direction. So not, the thoughts should be like a little more, fun, a little more lighthearted. What, kind of going back to this, what can I do, with this person to kind of reinvigorate? So there's definitely that element. And along with that overthinking element, we have the Nine of Swords here. So this is kind of telling me, again, like it's asking us to take it even a further, deeper dive into these thought processes. What thoughts are making you feel heavy? What thoughts are reoccurring? Is there a way to work within yourself? Is this really having to do with you and your projecting? I think, the Ace of Swords asks us to shift our thinking, but the Nine of Swords is asking us to really examine. Of course, I got that with the Ace of Swords as well, but I think that, with the Nine of Swords, that's really, where a lot of that examination is coming from, and really that heavier energy of thought. Why is there this heaviness, around your own day-to-day life in your mind, and why you be projecting that onto your significant other, or where does your significant other play into that? So it might not just be a pure projection, but at the same time, it might not be all their fault either. That also kind of leads back to the compromise thing that we had with the Eight of Pentacles, but it's really just a matter of kind of examining that thinking, realizing when you're kind of getting to that rut of overthinking, or stressful thinking that's kind of keeping you up at night and things like that, and being aware and kind of getting to the root of what's causing that. Awareness and getting down to the root, realizing, is this something that I'm projecting? Is this something that, is there something somewhere where I need to compromise? It's somewhere where, I need to talk to them that I feel like they need to compromise and they're not willing or have been acting as if they're willing to compromise, and we need to have a conversation. Just kind of getting to the root so that you can address it, not just kind of floundering and idling in these negative thought patterns, so to speak. It's just kind of taking it into another direction. So the next cards I want to talk about that I have here are the Hanged Man and the Eight of Wands, and I think that these are kind of playing off of each other. This is telling me a couple of things. So one of the first things that's kind of coming up for me is this need for presence in your relationship. I think, with this quarantine situation, and just the way, our minds and our egos work in general, we kind of like have this way of projecting onto the future. I know I'm using the word projecting a lot. It's just kind of the description that's coming to me. We have this way of focusing on the future or future moment when things are going to be better, when things are going to be different, and not really focusing on the present, not caretaking the present enough. So what we find is that, we're not appreciating the day-to-day, or something in our lives is falling apart and we're not really sure why. It's probably because we're distracted by, maybe there's like a past resentment that you're having trouble forgiving your significant other. Maybe you feel like they're having trouble forgiving you for something, and maybe you need to talk about that. It's kind of like a levee or something like that that's like pulling us back. So we're kind of like springing out, but then there's a force that kind of like pulls you back to the center. That's kind of what I'm seeing, just like that pulling back to the center, just kind of coming back and being present with the situation, what's really going on. Again, back to the Nine of Swords and the Ace of Swords, and just kind of hanging out there for a little bit, doing little things, if you go on those trips, or if you have those like little adventures, like the skinny dipping example or something along those lines, what have you. Once you kind of like make those little steps, you have to you can't expect things to completely shift overnight. If you're in a rut in your relationship, or if, your relationship is, if you just even feel like you need to strengthen your relationship, if you feel like you're kind of growing apart from someone, or being like, you're starting to disconnect from someone, I think, like these little changes or these little actions should be taken. And once they're taken, just kind of waiting to see what happens, kind of giving each other that room to take it in, to readjust, to work through your stuff, so they can work through theirs, so that they're working through their stuff as well, and then just seeing where the chips fall. So there has to be like a little bit of an element of patience, just waiting it out, just being present with your significant other. It's not all about, this future state or something that happened in the past, or, frustrations over, like being scared about what's going to happen, especially with, unsettling times with the quarantine and just everything that's going on in this world right now. There can be a lot of that future casting, that fear, and that takes us away from, not just the present, but it also takes us away from other people. It kind of brings us too heavy into our own minds, and then we disconnect from our bodies, we disconnect from, the world around us, we disconnect from the people that we love, not always intentionally. So it's just a matter of coming back, pulling yourself back, so to speak, and being patient. If you're trying to actively work on a relationship, and just hanging out with some of those uncomfortable feelings. I'm not trying to like push it away, or necessarily thinking that there's something wrong with your relationship, or that there's something that needs to be fixed in your relationship. There is, I think there's a lot of like shared energy right now. So you're feeling a lot of what your partner's feeling, and they're feeling a lot of what you're feeling. So anything could be, you could kind of think, oh, there's something wrong here between us, but it's really just that you're both kind of having your own struggles and kind of dampering the energy. So if you're more aware of that and more willing to just sit with the fact that things are a little bit uneasy right now, just sitting, just doing the work and then seeing what happens, doing the work and seeing what happens, sitting with uncomfortable feelings, There's definitely that element of talking and working through, but you can only do so much of that. Some of it's just really having to feel it out. And I think with the Hanged Man and the Eight of Wands are kind of giving me that similar message. It takes patience, it takes waiting it out. So I think that covers what I'm getting from the tarot cards. I also pulled from the Prism Oracle deck Anger and Rejection. These cards are kind of surmising specifically on the Swords cards that I picked up, the Ace of Swords and the Nine of Swords. I feel like we kind of get into these resentments, with the people that we care about the most. And a lot of that, again, is projection. A lot of that is, something that we're not able to get over, like something that they might have, something that they did in the past that might have hurt us, or, some disagreement that you just haven't gotten past, and there's this kind of like resentment that builds up. So that's kind of like where the anger comes from. And also the sense of rejection. I think that that's kind of like realizing like where maybe you're worried about your relationship, losing its fervor, losing its strength. Maybe you're kind of worried about that because you're insecure, because you're afraid, that they're going to ultimately reject you, where they, once loved you and once things were great. Maybe, things have changed over the years and you don't feel as good about yourself as maybe you once did, or you're at an impasse in your own life and you're kind of you're feeling negative. So you kind of feel like, oh, like they don't love me anymore. That might not be the case at all. Maybe they don't even feel this as much as you do. This could all just be kind of like something that you're building into your own experience, that this person is rejecting you when it might be that you're kind of rejecting yourself, so to speak. So kind of examining that thought process again and shifting that thinking, where you're getting angry unfoundedly, where you're feeling rejected, where there isn't a basis for it. Just being aware of those things and kind of shifting, and just, where has a relationship gone stale? Where can we reinvigorate with a trip, or where can we reinvigorate with a fun activity, and so on and so forth. What needs work? Where do we need to put the work in? Because maybe that's why, there's a slack that's causing, frustration between you, the anger, and then, maybe feeling unheard, feeling unseen, the rejection element. Anyway, that completes this reading and that completes this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and have a good one. Bye, guys.